Senators Merkley and Murray, Merkley, Kaine, and Lujan. Now, you know, we all know that a good number of Donald Trump's nominees are very, very troubling. But this guy is he's probably at the very top of the list in terms of how dangerous he is to working people and to America. Mr. Vought is the godfather of the ultra-right. He is the chief cook and bottle washer for Project 2025, which would decimate the lives of so many Americans. Here's some examples. Remember this chart from last year? I liked it so much we're using it again. See, they have ripped out paper and these exclamation points. And just look at them. Tax hike for the middle class. American workers get less pay for more work. Breaks apart the Department of State and World Bank. Rejects bipartisan solutions to fix our border. Opens the floodgates to big money and foreign influence. And repeals the $35 insulin cap. Abolishes the Department of Education. Eliminates Head Start. Paves the way for a national abortion ban. You name it. It's a parade of horribles, and this man is being put in charge. He's at the levers of power to implement these dangerous, dangerous proposals. As you know, the OMB director holds one of the most critical positions in the federal government. It affects every federal agency, every local economy, every town, city, every American family. So someone in this position has to understand what working families in America need. All the things Donald Trump said on such a high percentage of the things Donald Trump said on the campaign trail and promised would be undone by Project 2025. If American people, each American knew what was in it, they'd be aghast that the man in charge is now being put at the levers of power. Project 2025 did so many bad things that it's hard to slash Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, eliminate Head Start, cut SNAP, let drug prices go up because you won't do anything against Big Pharma. His vision isn't just reckless, it's catastrophic. Catastrophic. This man, I believe, I met with him yesterday, I asked him, tell me one thing in Project 2025 that you reject. He couldn't name a single thing in this parade of horribles. So he will do all of that, and then, of course, he's one of the masters. He's been leading the charge on impoundment of funds. This unelected man, who's from the hard right extreme, far away from even what most Republicans espouse, could decide what funds that we allocated could go forward, could be used. So as dangerous as what he said in Project 2025 is, and as dangerous as giving him the ability to have a say in what the administration does in all those things, the danger of impoundment is equally bad. He could just say, I don't like this program, I'm not spending the money on it. And then there'd be years of a court case to decide. So this man is an appalling nominee. I hope our Republicans on the other side will just see what this guy's all about and decide they can do better. I wish President Trump would look at what the guy proposed, so opposite of what many of the things Trump tried to say in his campaign. Our North Star is to ease the burden on American families, to make them pay less for things, to have more dollars in their pockets, to have better lives. Nothing could be further from that goal than picking Mr. Vought as head of OMB. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you. Russ Vought has made very clear that as Trump's budget director, he will put everything, as you can see, on the chopping block, from programs that people rely on to the checks and balances that our democracy is actually founded on. In this same role, last time, Vought tried to break the law to give President Trump unilateral authority he does not possess to override the spending decisions of Congress. It defies all common sense and judgment to put him back in the same role, especially when, as chief architect of Project 2025, he has doubled down on lawlessness, charted a blatantly unconstitutional plan for the president to ignore the will of Congress. not to mention his long history of anti-abortion extremism. This is someone who does not even believe in exceptions for rape or incest or the life of the mother. Given his extremism and his clear disdain for the rule of law, we should not hand vote power that he has made clear he will abuse to help billionaires get ahead at working people's expense. Yesterday, I asked him directly, will you follow the law? Because even if you disagree with the law, you can't ignore them. Maybe you don't like the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, but unless it's changed or struck down, you still have to follow it. This is something every single American understands, except, apparently, Russ Vought, because the Impoundment Control Act remains the law of the land, and the Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the power of the purse. And yet Russ Vought will not say that he will follow the law. If you're not willing to follow our laws, well, then you cannot be trusted to implement our laws. If you will not commit to respecting constitutional checks and balances, then why on earth should Congress or the American people entrust you with power? Seriously, no senator who believes Congress holds the power of the purse should vote for an OMB director who will not respect the laws that we pass or disperse the investments we as lawmakers have secured for our states. We're not talking about whether or not our constituents have their voices. We are actually talking about whether or not our constituents have their vote and voices heard. We're talking about the most basic ability of Congress to negotiate deals and do our jobs. How are we ever supposed to reach a bipartisan compromise here if Vought and President Trump are just going to ignore any bargain we strike, as the President has already taken sweeping action to do just that? That's not rhetorical. I want an answer. If the President can just decide he won't fund infrastructure programs that Congress funded on a bipartisan basis, how are we going to ever get anything done around here? What are the communities we represent who are counting on these investments going to do? And of course, when we talk about Russ Vought, we're talking about sweeping cuts to programs that people rely on every single day. Because Vought has made all too clear, as OMB director, he won't just draw blood. He will cut programs families rely on to the bone, SNAP, that families that are hungry rely on. A wall of paperwork to cut people off from their health care. Thousands of public servants forced out of roles serving the American people, all while he works with Trump to dole out more tax breaks to billionaires and the biggest corporations. The vision is all out there in public statements and Project 2025. Vought hasn't been secretive or subtle. He wants to ignore the law. He wants to ignore the will of Congress. He wants to ignore the needs of our constituents, and we should not give him that opportunity. I'll be making very clear to every one of my colleagues, especially my fellow appropriators, we need to maintain Congress's power of the purse and our most basic checks and balances. We need to ensure that our communities, Republican and Democratic, are protected, and we need to reject Russ Vaught's nomination.
Thank you, Patty, because every member here, Jeff is chairman, ranking member rather, of our Budget Committee, new ranking member, and every member here is on the Budget Committee, and I want to compliment them all. I hope you watched the hearings yesterday, which everyone here did a great job. Chairman, or ranking member Merkley, one day to be chairman again.
Well, thank you very much. Leader Schumer and Chair Murray have absolutely laid out the challenge, and it was so confirmed in the budget hearing yesterday. Let's understand this. The position of director of the Office of Management and Budget doesn't get the same attention as a Secretary of Defense nominee or an intelligence nominee or a health nominee, but that individual is the chief engineer of the Trump train. Yes, there's a car dedicated to defense and one to Secretary, but the chief engineer is the head of OMB. Different way of thinking about it is they are both the person who plans the flights in and out of all the airports and then make sure the planes don't hit each other. They are absolutely critical to driving the agenda. That is why this nominee, Mr. Vought, is the most dangerous nominee put forward by Trump. He has a three-part plan. The first part of the plan is to cut the programs for families across the country. Health care, housing, education, programs for children. That's the first part of the plan. The second part of the plan is to borrow a massive amount, multiple trillions, and run up the deficit. And then the third part of the plan is to take the money saved by cutting programs for families and the money borrowed from the Treasury to give tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans. Now, that plan has been re-emphasized 3 times. First of all, he served in this very role as chief engineer, director of OMB, at the end of the last Trump administration, and he put forward the last budget for President Trump, and it had exactly those 3 elements. And then he proceeded to run a think tank, or he created his own little think tank, and that think tank put forward the same 3 points. And then he became the chief architect of Project 2025, which again emphasized the 3 points. Borrow massively, run up the deficit, cut programs for workers, and give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans. And in the process, he has shown complete disregard for the law. There's this fancy term, impoundments. Well, let's explain it this way, that Congress decides how much to be spent on each program. But Mr. Vought is very frank, saying, I believe that's just a ceiling. I believe the president gets to decide how much is spent on each program. Well, we had this argument back in 1974 when we had the Budget and Impoundment Control Act. We had this argument in 1996 when we had a single line veto, budget line veto, and it was struck down by the Supreme Court. This law is not in question, but today he says he will continue to violate the law when he is in this position. And in fact, it was the impoundment that he helped direct on Ukraine that led to Trump's first impeachment, and he holds no qualms about having played such a critical role and putting the president in such a terrible decision and a terrible political position. And he absolutely exudes hate for federal workers. And my colleagues will say more about that. But let's understand, are you going to be doing your work as a civil servant in a nonpartisan, in accordance with the law, or in accordance with things that are against the law because of loyalty? Replacing our nonpartisan, capable federal workers is a big mistake. He has been part of the big lie on elections and continues to make that big lie today. As Chair Murray pointed out, he has extraordinarily extreme views about the reproductive rights of women in America. In sum, he is all about the golden age that Trump talked about as impeachment, at his inauguration, excuse me. And that golden age is for big pharma and big oil. That golden age is for Wall Street and hedge funds. That golden age is for big tech. But you know what it is for the rest of the working families, ordinary families across America? It's not the golden age, it's the dark ages. That's why we must reject this nomination.
Senator Kaine.
Morning, everybody. So I have 140,000 federal employees in Virginia, and they all have families. They all have people who care about them all over the Commonwealth, from VA nurses to active duty troops to people doing food inspections. And these are hardworking Virginians that I represent. Russ Vought has an unusual degree of gleeful hatred for the federal workforce. He gave a speech that I asked him about yesterday where he said, I want bureaucrats to be traumatized when they come into work because increasingly they know that they are the villains. He wants the federal workforce traumatized because they should know that they are the villains. Who talks like this? Who talks like this? You all have been in many speeches where you've heard people say, we need to cut federal spending, or we need to deal with the deficit. We hear these speeches all the time, often from Republican colleagues who then don't take any actions to do it, but that is a standard way of talking about the issue of government spending. But I don't know of anybody, much less anybody being considered for a position of this magnitude, who has a gleeful desire to traumatize people who are working for the federal government. And when I asked him about that, you want to traumatize like folks who are going out to be the air traffic controllers out at Reagan? Well, no. You want to traumatize the people inspecting our food, our medicines, well, no. You want to traumatize OMB folks? People might think they're well, no. Traumatize those interdicting fentanyl at the border? Well, no. Why'd you say it then? I know that Mr. Vought proclaims to be a faithful person, so I used a Bible verse on him, Luke 6:45, from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The way you capture a thought reveals something very important about who you are as a person. And this gleeful hatred of the federal workforce will lead to nothing good. The second thing, I just want to emphasize what the leader talked about with regard to Project 2025. Senator Merkley mentioned this too. Project 2025 had a kind of an origin story in another document that Mr. Vought was the key architect of. He set up a think tank. That think tank proposed a document about the federal budget. The title of this budget document was An End to Woke and Weaponized Government. Okay. Well, I'm interested. 104 pages. What are you going to do to end woke and weaponized government in your budget, Mr. Vought? And he explained, you look at the document, /SNAP benefits, /Pell Grants, /low-income heating and energy assistance programs, /rental assistance. I asked him about all of those. Tell me why these are woke and weaponized programs. And again, what he said is, I'm not here to defend that document. He wrote it. He named it. He's tipped us all off about what he's going to do. Nobody will be surprised when the Trump first budget comes over here and it's got the thumbprints of Russ Vought's Project 2025 and End to Woke and Weaponized Government all over it, slashing these programs that everyday people count on. He is a nominee who has told us all that he's going to do things that will be very harmful to the American public. We need to reject him. Thanks so much.
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Chuck. Good morning, everyone. You know, to carry off of what my colleagues are sharing this morning after this hearing yesterday, I don't know how many of you had a chance to take it in. I'm going to carry forward a little bit where Senator Kaine was just talking about. While Mr. Vought responded to Senator Kaine in saying that he was not there to talk about this report that he authored. He's the coach. He wrote the playbook. When I asked him to further clarify why this group and this document was founded and put together, he owned it. He said it right there, his words to the committee and to the American people. So just make no mistake about what's coming. Mr. Vought is the person, the proof that this document exists, Project 2025, the documents that got put into it, this notion that all of these programs that make a difference, a positive difference in people's lives, to help when those utility bills get a little high. Right now, everyone's wearing jackets, scarves. You're worried about getting cold. We had this crazy storm that hit a big part of America that usually doesn't get piles of snow. Did you all see those photos in Florida? The entire South. You can't stay warm in the winter and your heat goes out. You can't insulate your home. You might die. You're going to get really sick, and especially for the most vulnerable against us. Why in the world would this person author an effort to eliminate the programs that matter in, let's pick a few states. How about Ohio and Wisconsin, where some of my colleagues serve on that committee, where their constituents depend on these programs every day? Well, one area that caught my attention in this document is, it said, quote, Head Start participants have worse behavior and academic outcomes than children who do not enroll in the program. I think Mr. Vought was surprised when I told him I went to Head Start. Got me to the United States Senate. What do you think about that? Didn't respond. My constituents that go to that Head Start that's steps away from the church that I go to, when I'm back in New Mexico, what's he telling to these kids all across America? And what's he saying about early childhood education? Why is that on the chopping block? And quite honestly, every one of these programs and other programs that President Trump has talked about in a favorable way, it's all on the chopping block. As a matter of fact, when these budgets come to the American people and to Congress, they're going to have Mr. Vought's signature on them, just like these other budgets do as well. So I'm very concerned about where we stand today. And here's what it comes down to. All of those teachers, those police officers, the firefighters, the pipe fitters, the iron workers, the builders back in New Mexico, those small businesses that are our favorites. I hope someone speaks up when these budgets come forward and they're going to increase costs on all of these families and make things harder. There's got to be a better way to do this. As I close here, just make no mistake about all my brothers and sisters who have claimed that Project 2025 didn't exist, that they never read it, that they weren't aware of it, because Mr. Vought is proof that it exists. And now he's being nominated as the head person to put these budgets together. It's about time that someone's honest with the American people, and I certainly hope that President Trump and others are willing to speak up about this nonsense and just own it, just like Mr. Vought did.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate one thing. Yesterday or 2 days ago, President Trump talked about the golden age. Yeah, it's a golden age for drug manufacturers. It's a golden age for big oil companies. It's a golden age for billionaires. It is not at all a golden age for middle-class people who need help and don't get the tax help that the wealthy get. It's not a golden age for American workers who get less pay. It's not a golden age for helping the people who need food stamps. It's not a golden age for people who need insulin to be cheaper. The golden age is only for a very limited few, unfortunately. You could not have a worse nominee in a more powerful position than Mr. Vought. On this subject first. Yes.
Have you talked to any of your Republican colleagues or any of you who are even thinking about voting against Mr. Vought?
Well, we just had the hearing yesterday. It's all coming out. Project 2025, they used to say, had nothing to do with the Trump presidency. It has everything to do with the Trump presidency. And as they learn it, I hope we'll get some votes from their side. It's going to hurt their constituents as much as anybody. Yes.
On empowerment, Trump announced a funding freeze on foreign aid and on green energy. Are you saying those orders are illegal or unconstitutional? And if so, what can you do about it? Are you going to file a lawsuit, or what do you do with this?
It is still the IRA, for instance, clean energy, which I wrote in large part in the IRA, is the law. To impound those funds would be unconstitutional. Absolutely. Yes.
Other than Senators McConnell, Murkowski, and Collins, have you received any indications from your GOP colleagues privately that they're considering voting against Pete Hegseth's nomination?
Okay, I want to stick to the subject. But on this subject, Pete Hegseth is so utterly unqualified. He ranks up there with Vought as one of the very worst nominees that could be put forward. The Defense Department, people's lives depend on it. Civilians and, of course, the men and women in the armed services. And Pete Hegseth has shown himself not only incapable of running a large organization, he often shows himself incapable of showing up, or showing up in a way where he could get anything done. He is so out of the mainstream and so unqualified for DOD that I am hopeful we will get our Republican colleagues to join us. There'll be a vote this afternoon. Yes.
Schumer, just on the nominees, I do have Democratic support, bipartisan support, because there are some, like John Ratcliffe. Do you support Chris Murphy slowing this confirmation process down, and do you think that's going to happen with other bipartisan?
Look, there are some nominees like Rubio that got broad support, but to have a detailed discussion, I have some doubts about Mr. Ratcliffe, particularly when I asked him how he'd react if Tulsi Gabbard were put in charge of him in the DNI. So I think it's for a day or two or a few hours to examine these nominees who have such power thoroughly. Absolutely. Absolutely. Our idea is to let whole truth come out. If they try to rush them through, we don't want that to happen. Yes.
On federal workers, what's your reaction to them, to the Trump administration ending telework for federal workers? It affects a lot of different workers who've been working from home recently because of the COVID.
Yeah, and I'll call on Tim, who's been our federal expert. But telework works in a lot of ways. To just take a blanket brush across and say get rid of all telework is going to hurt millions and millions of Americans who depend on these people doing their jobs. There are many ways that telework is very, very effective. And when you say get rid of all telework, it just means you want to take a dagger to the heart of federal workers and the federal government. Tim, do you want to follow up?
I'd love to tackle that one. There was a hearing in the House not long ago, last year, where the OPM director appeared before the House for the last time. And he revealed results of a study. The percentage of federal workers that telework is lower than the percentage of private sector workers that telework. Why is that? Well, what you ought to be focusing on is being effective, and a lot of private employers have realized telework is really effective, just like we've realized telehealth can be really effective. You can access course content via, tele-platforms. And so why would you just have an across-the-board rule rejecting what is a best practice now in the private sector to do it? I have my caseworkers do a lot of telework because my tax expert, for example, is in Abingdon, Virginia, in Appalachia, and she handles all of the tax concerns raised by Virginians in any part of the state. Her job has always been telework. Even when she's in the office, she's interacting with constituents essentially via telework. So that kind of across-the-board thing is just designed to make people's lives harder. It's part of this trauma strategy. But the real challenge with it is it leads to less effective service of our fellow Americans, which is what we want our federal workers to do.
Thanks, everybody.